stuff that is acidic as battery acid on the top of these stacks. They're not just dirt. They're a dirt berm behind which sits an enormous pool, sometimes several gigantic pools of what has the acidity of battery acid, or sometimes lemon juice, or something. Anyhow, the stuff leaks slowly but surely. We believe that every single one of these stacks is leaking. They have to be leaking. And slowly the acid, remember in elementary school science class, in the inevitable thing where you have a little container of bicarbonate of soda, baking soda, and you throw some apple cider vinegar from home on it, and boom, it erupts in this reaction. Well, that's what's been going on slowly but surely under these stacks, all of them. And it's going on to this day around every single one of these things. It is a clear and present danger. They need to be capped, they need to be sealed, they need to, you have to keep rainwater off of them so there's no more liquid falling on the top of these things and encase them in like 10 feet of concrete with rebar and everything, and just shut them down and give those phosphate companies a perk walk the hell out of the state once and for all. This is Florida. This is ag land. This is agricultural land. You see the pasture land behind it. There's one of those beautiful live oak trees. That's pine flatwoods. I'm sorry, it's so dark. But it's magnificent habitat. It looks kind of low and uninteresting, but it's home for thousands of important species. This is the Ona mine. It's going to be mined. It is owned by Mosaic. They're filing for their permits in Hardin County soon. And this is also part of the Ona mine. This is old cattle ranch land. Off to the sort of right is a vernal wetland, an occasional wetland, where just beautiful, beautiful habitat. West Central and Central Florida is some of the most extraordinarily beautiful places I have ever seen. I'm from upstate New York, Catskill Mountains, everything. Yeah, it's great. And Maine and Arcadia. I've been all over the world, but there's something just heartbreakingly beautiful about the center of Florida. And the phosphate mining has permanently destroyed some 830 square miles. It's almost the size of Rhode Island of West Central Florida. It's habitat for these guys. Raise your hands if you know what that is. And it is? Crested caracara, right? You are. It's a sort of a falconish. It's a sort of a hybrid between a falcon and a vulture. It is technically a falcon, but they're opportunistic feeders. You'll see them by the roadside. They're endangered. They live here. Gopher tortoises. They live here. What Mosaic does, they say, oh, we've moved all the gopher tortoises. We've moved all the endangered species. They take the tortoises. The hole behind the tortoise is the key thing. Something like 300 species depend on that hole. And then, including other endangered species like the indigo snake. So you can't just take the tortoise and plop it down someplace. And here is the iconic Florida panther, which is all over there. Okay, this is what happens to their habitat when Mosaic comes to town. It gets bulldozed and it gets burned. Then it gets dug down to a depth of 60 to 70 feet. The land, including the superficial aquifer and part of the intermediate aquifer as well, gets dug out. Imagine just digging out an aquifer and sort of throwing it away in a heap of dirt. These hundreds of square miles get dug out to a depth of 60, 70 feet, some of which they can fill back in again, but think about it, do the math. They've removed 20 or 30 feet of the phosphate material. They don't have enough stuff to put it all back. So you wind up with things like that. That white stuff is sand tailings. They're just somebody started to fill this in and then gave up on it. This is, if you could see in the background, off into the distance, as far as the eye can see, the landscape has been destroyed. Destroyed. And it looks just like that, and it looks like that. That's Florida, West Central Florida. It could be Polk County, it could be Manatee County, it could be Hardin County, it could be DeSoto County. Hillsborough County was almost entirely mined out. Polk County is 50% mined land. And not surprisingly, they have a water crisis now. They're like scratching their heads. What do? We have a water crisis. We can't find enough drinking water. Of course, Mosaic has a permit, and they're still taking unlimited groundwater out from under Polk County to blend or mix or dilute ongoing toxic waste discharges from their facilities, even though years after they've been closed. And the feds and the state let them do this, even though the quantity of toxins doesn't change. It's just diluted, so it meets their standards, and it goes off into the streams and creeks and everything, meeting the standards. It's just what are they thinking? This is the gear that does it. This is a drag line. I don't know if you can see it. My laser, no. There's a little tiny pickup truck up in the upper right corner there behind the drag line. Those things look like the superstructure of a super tanker when you see them. This is one of those, as far as the eye can see, photographs. Those lakes in the background with the curiously rectangular forms, those are called clay settling areas. They're basically pools where the clay comes out of the the flotation plants where they separate out the phosphate and goes into these pools. They call them clay settling areas because the clay is supposed to settle to the bottom so they can reuse the water, and they're all very proud of their recycling of the water and blah, blah, blah. But the fact is that the clay is coated with millions upon millions upon millions of pounds a year of petrochemicals. And that stuff is just going to sit there forever. It's also radioactive. Okay, they talk about how this stuff that went down the sinkhole is slightly radioactive. Well, when it comes to radioactivity and pregnancy are the same. You're not slightly radioactive, you're not slightly pregnant, you are or you aren't. There is no threshold for safe radioactive intake for humans or animals. Across the board, every responsible scientific agency or entity says that there is no acceptable limit for radioactivity. So to say it's slightly, the fact is there is a naturally occurring background radioactivity here, and what they don't tell you is that, and they'll say this is just all the natural radioactivity. Yeah, it's natural radioactivity, but it's been concentrated up to 60 times uranium and radium. The first bombs, the bombs we dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, we are the only nation in the world that actually used the nuclear bomb, right? We all know that. Those bombs were built with enriched uranium from Florida phosphate mines. There's a dragline working in the background. I wish I could say that was a school bus, but then again, the fact that it's full of migrant workers is also equally compelling. There's a tremendous amount of environmental justice issues around phosphate mining because most of those phosphogypsum stacks, which are still being built onto, still being added to today, are in poor and minority neighborhoods. They were located there for a reason, and they call it environmental racism, and it's alive and well in Florida. And the dust you see in the air there, that's phosphate dust, and it's full of fluorides and fluorines, which is some of the most toxic material in the process. Now, this is just a quick picture of, what am I doing for time? I'm okay. The crosshatched land is the blotch in the middle that's crosshatched is the mine area, the so-called Bone Valley. The crosshatch, I just wanted to demonstrate how much of the cross-section of Florida has been taken up with these mines. That's the densely developed East Coast. The blue line is sort of the more or less north-south movement of surface water and groundwater. And the panther-colored arrow coming up from the bottom is the more or less movement of panthers and other species who will have to migrate northward to get away from things like sea level rise, development, and other pressures that force them to they're also trying to expand their old historic range. Every once in a while you find one up in the Panhandle run over by the side of the road. They're always sort of looking to go north. And they can't, the land in the crosshatches is, well, you saw the pictures of it. It will not support species. It will not. You can't. A panther, no other animal can get through it. Can't walk by it. You just got this narrow corridor to escape through. This is just a photo of the mines. If you look at the little, you'll see the little yellow patches with red outlines around them. Those are the phosphogypsum stacks. There's a lot of them. 5 million pounds of toxic, overtly toxic waste per year going into, and they always claim that it's on site. Well, this is one of those sites. This is a fertilizer plant at the mouth of the Alafaya River in Riverview. During a recent event where something blew and they're releasing toxic gases, acidic and chemical gases into the community, and sickening people for weeks. Everybody had to stay indoors. No publicity. Thankfully, in the perverse language, the dialectic of the environment, something bad is good. The sinkhole appears, it's a bad thing, but all of a sudden it's brought a tremendous amount of attention to phosphate mining and its badness, and so, there it is. The other thing that happens is sometimes those phosphogypsum stacks breach. That's the berm at the top. That breach right there sterilized the entire 30 miles of the Alafaya River for years. Killed millions of fish. Here's some health impacts that are found that are associated with living near these phosphogypsum stacks. These are people we're talking about. And here's a dead river otter with fluorosis, loss of teeth, black stains. These are wild animals that are, there are so many reports of wild animals that can't walk, that have vertigo and so on in that area, and lesions on their paws. Solutions, regenerative agriculture. The solution is regenerative agriculture. I'll say it again. The UN is taking it up, the UN is looking at it. Turns out, Mosaic claims it feeds the world. It turns out that family farms feed the world. 25% of farms. The 25% of small family farms that are left in the world after Monsanto drives them out of business and stuff like that, they are still making more than 50% of the world's food. They operate more efficiently using traditional methods than all of our factory industry. The myth of industrial farming is nothing more than a corporate takeover of the world's food supply, and Mosaic is a key player in that corporate takeover. They're partners with Monsanto, Nestle, and other companies that are Nestle's trying to take over the water. And just one last slide, and I'll take a couple of questions. This is, there's a myth that phosphate mining is good for the state of Florida, but if you just do the most basic math, where do the profits go? It's a publicly held corporation. The profits go to shareholders elsewhere. Where does the phosphate go? Well, 70% of it gets exported. The rest of it goes out of the state. Very little of it is used in-state. And what little is used in-state goes into the Lake Okeechobee, drifting down there because the farmers don't use good management practices, and creates these mats of blue-green algae, killing everything in their path, and have gone out the Caloosahatchee and out to the Indian River Lagoon, both coasts where there are massive fish kills as we speak. So just, if you want to contact me later, this is so hard to do. I'm sorry, I actually ran over, but this is a complicated issue. It's a big one, and we have to drive these people out of the state of Florida. I thank you, Dr. Stein, for letting me have some of your time. Oh, I didn't introduce myself. My name is Andy Melee, M-E-L-E. I have some cards I'll give you if anybody wants. And it is, somebody's waving at me. I'll leave them up front at the table. Thank you. I'm with the Sierra Club and the Manatee Sarasota Group, and also with Suncoast Waterkeeper, and I have a long history of environmental activism on the Hudson River. I worked to help bring General Electric, world's most profitable corporation at the time, to the table. After fighting for 30 years to avoid cleaning toxic PCBs out of the river. I worked with Pete Seeger. So,